from disorder to response, from deficit to adaptation, from something wrong inside the person to something that occurred in the environment around them, is the foundation of everything Gabor Maté understood about ADHD. And it is a reframe that has consequences not only for how ADHD is understood and treated, but for how the people who carry the diagnosis understand themselves, their history, their genuine capacities, the specific intelligence that the diagnostic label has so consistently failed to honor. Gabor Maté came to this understanding from an unusual position. He was a physician who received an ADHD diagnosis in his 50s, having spent decades living inside the specific qualities that the diagnosis describes without adequate language for what he was experiencing or adequate understanding of where it came from. And he brought to the subject not only his clinical expertise, but his own honest, autobiographical experience of what it actually feels like to inhabit a mind that processes the world differently, and what it costs over a lifetime to inhabit that mind in environments that were never designed to accommodate it. His book, Scattered Minds, later reissued as Scattered, is one of the most personally honest and clinically grounded accounts of ADHD available, not because it provides a more effective treatment protocol, because it provides a fundamentally different account of what ADHD actually is, where it comes from, what it represents about the person who carries it, and what genuine support for that person actually requires. Today, I want to give you that account, honestly, in the specific detail that makes it practically relevant, whether you carry the diagnosis yourself, whether someone you love does, or whether you are simply someone who has always sensed that the standard account of ADHD as a neurological disorder was missing something important about the human beings it was describing. The first thing that needs to be understood is what Gabor Maté meant when he said ADHD is a response rather than a disorder. He was not denying that the neurological differences are real, the specific patterns of dopamine regulation, the particular quality of attention that characterizes ADHD, the genuine difficulty with sustained focus in certain contexts, and the equally genuine capacity for extraordinary, absorbed focus in others. These are real, documentable, neurologically present features of the ADHD mind. Gabor Maté never suggested otherwise. What he questioned was the interpretive framework applied to these differences, the framework that treats them as deficits, as the absence of capacities that a properly functioning brain should have, rather than as adaptations, as the specific neurological expression of a nervous system that developed in response to a specific relational and environmental context, producing a specific profile of capacities and challenges that makes complete sense when understood in the context of its developmental origin. The ADHD brain, in Gabor Maté's understanding, is not a brain that failed to develop adequate attention regulation. It is a brain that developed a specific kind of attention regulation in response to a specific developmental environment. And understanding what that environment was and what the nervous system was doing in response to it changes everything about how the diagnosis is received and what genuine support for the person who carries it actually looks like. The developmental environment that most consistently produces the neurological profile associated with ADHD is characterized by a specific and well-documented quality: emotional stress during the prenatal period and early childhood, not necessarily dramatic trauma, the specific, chronic, low-grade quality of emotional stress that is present in the caregiving environment, when the caregiver is themselves under significant stress, anxious, depressed, overwhelmed, distracted, or simply not sufficiently emotionally present to provide the quality of attuned, consistent, genuinely responsive caregiving that the developing nervous system requires for optimal development. This connection is not speculative. It is documented in the research that Gabor Maté drew on extensively. The children most consistently at elevated risk for ADHD diagnoses are the children whose early developmental environments were characterized by the specific qualities of parental stress, emotional unavailability, and relational inconsistency that prevent optimal development of the dopaminergic and prefrontal systems most associated with attention regulation. The nervous system developing in this environment does not simply fail to develop adequate attention regulation. It develops a specific attentional profile that was, in the original context, genuinely adaptive. The heightened sensitivity to environmental stimuli, the specific quality of a nervous system that learned to monitor the emotional atmosphere continuously for signals about safety and connection. The difficulty sustaining attention on tasks that do not provide immediate emotional engagement, the specific quality of a nervous system that learned that the most important information was always in the emotional environment rather than in the content of any particular task. The extraordinary capacity for hyperfocus when genuine interest and emotional engagement are present. The specific quality of a nervous system that can deploy its full attentional resources when the material activates the emotional engagement that the original environment taught was the signal of genuine significance. These are not deficits. They are adaptations. Specific, intelligible, developmentally coherent adaptations of a nervous system that was doing exactly what nervous systems are designed to do, calibrating itself to the actual environment it was developing within. Gabor Maté was careful to say that this understanding does not produce blame. The parents whose stress produced the developmental environment that shaped the child's nervous system were themselves carrying the consequences of their own developmental histories, their own stresses, their own inadequately supported circumstances. The chain of causation is long, and no single link in it is straightforwardly culpable. What the understanding produces is not blame, but context. The specific, compassionate, genuinely illuminating context that allows the ADHD diagnosis to be understood as meaningful information about developmental history, rather than as a verdict about neurological inadequacy. Now I want to give you the 7 specific things that Gabor Maté's understanding of ADHD reveals about the people who carry the diagnosis, things that the standard deficit model consistently fails to see. The first thing it reveals is that the ADHD mind is not an inattentive mind. It is a selectively attentive mind. The standard account of ADHD focuses on the difficulty of sustained attention, the specific challenge of maintaining focus on tasks that do not provide immediate reward or emotional engagement. This difficulty is real, but what the deficit account misses is the equally real and equally significant capacity for extraordinary sustained attention when the conditions are right. Gabor Maté described this as the difference between interest-based attention and task-based attention. The neurotypical nervous system can deploy sustained attention on the basis of task requirement. Because the task needs to be done, the attention can be maintained. The ADHD nervous system deploys sustained attention on the basis of genuine interest and emotional engagement. When the material activates genuine curiosity, genuine passion, genuine emotional investment, the same person who cannot maintain attention on a required but unstimulating task can focus with extraordinary depth and duration. This is not a deficit. It is a different attentional architecture, one that has genuine costs in environments organized around task-based attention requirements, and genuine gifts in environments that reward depth of engagement with genuinely interesting material. The second thing it reveals is that the ADHD sensitivity is a genuine perceptual gift that the deficit model frames as a liability. The heightened environmental sensitivity that characterizes ADHD, the specific quality of a nervous system that registers more of what is happening in the surrounding environment than the less sensitive system does, is consistently framed in the deficit model as distraction, as the failure to filter irrelevant stimuli adequately, as a problem of signal-to-noise ratio in which too much noise is admitted alongside the relevant signal. Gabor Maté understood it differently. The same sensitivity that makes certain structured environments genuinely difficult to navigate is the sensitivity that makes the ADHD person extraordinarily attuned to emotional nuance, genuinely perceptive about relational dynamics, capable of registering what others miss. The artist, the entrepreneur, the therapist, the crisis responder, whose ADHD sensitivity is a genuine professional asset, is not succeeding despite the ADHD. They are succeeding through the specific perceptual capacities that the ADHD nervous system developed. The third thing it reveals is that the dopamine system's specific characteristics in ADHD are connected to the developmental history in ways that have profound implications for genuine support. The dopamine system in ADHD, which is involved in motivation, reward processing, and the regulation of attention, functions differently from the neurotypical dopamine system in specific and documented ways. Gabor Maté drew on the research connecting this specific dopamine profile to the developmental history of stress and emotional unavailability that most consistently produces it. The dopamine system that developed in an environment of emotional unpredictability and stress learns something specific about reward and motivation. That immediate, concrete, emotionally engaging reward is more reliably available than delayed, abstract, or socially sanctioned reward. And it calibrates itself accordingly, producing the specific profile of motivation that the ADHD person experiences. Strong motivation toward immediately engaging, emotionally resonant activity. Weak motivation toward delayed reward, abstract requirement, or socially imposed obligation. This calibration is not a malfunction. It is the logical product of a developmental history in which immediate emotional engagement was, in fact, more reliably available than delayed reward, and understanding it as such, rather than as a character deficit of insufficient willpower or insufficient self-discipline, changes how genuine support is approached. The fourth thing it reveals is that shame is one of the most significant and most consistently unaddressed aspects of the ADHD experience. The person who grows up with ADHD in an educational and social environment organized around neurotypical attentional capacities accumulates, across years of genuine difficulty meeting the environment's requirements, a specific and significant burden of shame. The shame of the intelligent person who cannot do what seems to come easily to others. Of the capable person whose genuine capacities are consistently invisible in the contexts that most demand the capacities they most genuinely lack. Of the person who has been told, explicitly or implicitly, through grades and assessments and the specific quality of adult frustration that their genuine difficulty consistently produced, that the problem is not the environment's fit, but their own fundamental inadequacy. Gabor Maté observed that this accumulated shame is one of the most significant contributors to the genuine suffering of adults with ADHD. Not the attentional difficulties themselves, which are genuine and genuinely challenging, but the specific, internalized, often entirely unconscious framework of self-assessment that the years of environmental mismatch produced. The framework that says, I am not trying hard enough, I am not disciplined enough, I am not capable of what I should be capable of. the framework that locates the difficulty in the person's character rather than in the specific mismatch between the person's neurological profile and the environments that failed to accommodate it. Understanding that the difficulty was never a character deficit, that it was a developmentally coherent adaptation to a specific early environment expressing itself in a contemporary environment that was not designed to accommodate it, does not eliminate the practical challenges, but it changes the interior atmosphere in which those challenges are navigated. From the specific, depleting, genuinely costly atmosphere of shame to the considerably more workable atmosphere of honest, compassionate self-understanding. The fifth thing it reveals is that genuine environments for ADHD are not primarily about accommodation, they are about genuine fit. The standard response to ADHD in educational and professional contexts is accommodation, the extra time, the reduced distraction environment, the specific modifications that attempt to make the standard environment more navigable for the ADHD nervous system. These accommodations are genuinely valuable, but they address the mismatch at the level of the environment's surface features rather than at the level of what the ADHD nervous system genuinely requires. What the ADHD nervous system genuinely requires, what Gabor Maté identified as the conditions under which the specific gifts of the ADHD mind are most fully available and the specific challenges are most genuinely manageable, is genuine interest, genuine autonomy, genuine emotional engagement with the material, genuine movement between tasks as interest dictates rather than as schedule requires, genuine permission to work in the specific way that the ADHD nervous system actually works, rather than in the specific way that neurotypical organizational structures require. These are not accommodations. They are fundamentally different environmental designs, and they produce, in the person whose ADHD is genuinely accommodated at this level, a fundamentally different quality of engagement and output than the standard environment with surface modifications produces. The sixth thing it reveals is that the ADHD capacity for hyperfocus is one of the most genuinely extraordinary capacities available in any neurological profile. When the conditions are right, when the material activates the genuine interest and emotional engagement that the ADHD attentional system requires, the hyperfocus that the ADHD nervous system produces is not simply sustained attention. It is absorbed, complete, extraordinarily productive immersion in the material that excludes everything else, with an efficiency that the neurotypical attentional system, which is continuously managing the competing claims of multiple relevant stimuli, cannot match. The artist who works through the night without noticing the hours passing. The scientist whose genuine curiosity about a specific problem produces days of unbroken, extraordinarily productive investigation. The entrepreneur whose passionate engagement with a specific challenge produces the specific, sustained, extraordinarily energetic focus that builds something genuinely new. These are not people who have overcome their ADHD. They are people whose ADHD is expressing its specific genius in the conditions that allow it. The seventh thing, the most important, the one that Gabor Maté returned to most consistently as the foundation from which everything else follows. The genuine healing of the ADHD experience is not the management of a neurological deficit. It is the recovery of the self that the deficit framework has obscured. The person who carries an ADHD diagnosis has very often spent years or decades understanding themselves primarily through the lens of what they cannot do, what they cannot sustain, what they cannot organize, complete, follow through on, sit still for, remember in the absence of immediate relevance. This understanding is not entirely inaccurate. These genuine challenges are real, but it is profoundly incomplete. because the same nervous system that produces these genuine challenges also produces the specific, genuine, irreplaceable gifts that the deficit framework has so consistently failed to honor: the sensitivity, the creativity, the capacity for hyperfocus in genuine interest, the specific quality of relational attunement that the heightened environmental sensitivity makes available, the entrepreneurial energy, the capacity for non-linear thinking that sees connections and possibilities that more linearly organized minds consistently miss. These gifts are not compensations for the deficit. They are the other face of the same neurological profile, the same attentional architecture that produces the challenge of sustained focus in unstimulating contexts produces the gift of extraordinary absorbed focus in genuinely engaging ones. The same sensitivity that makes certain environments overwhelming produces the perceptual depth that makes genuine creative and relational work possible. And the person who finally understands this, who receives the ADHD diagnosis not as a verdict about neurological inadequacy, but as a description of a specific neurological profile with genuine challenges and genuine gifts, both of which are developmentally coherent responses to a specific early environment, that person has access to something that the deficit framework never provided: an honest, compassionate, genuinely complete account of who they actually are, of where the specific qualities of their mind came from, of what those qualities genuinely make possible alongside what they genuinely make difficult. That account does not resolve the practical challenges, but it changes the interior atmosphere in which those challenges are navigated. From shame and self-criticism and the continuous management of perceived inadequacy to the considerably more workable and considerably more honest atmosphere of genuine self-knowledge and genuine self-compassion. And the privilege of a lifetime, the one Gabor Maté pointed toward with everything he had, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, including the specific, developmentally coherent, genuinely gifted mind that the ADHD diagnosis has been describing all along, without the shame, without the deficit framework, without the specific, costly, entirely unnecessary burden of believing that the way your mind works is evidence of something wrong. It is not wrong. It is yours. And it deserves the same honest, compassionate understanding that Gabor Maté spent his career offering to every human being whose genuine nature had been misread by the frameworks designed to assess it.